Okay, so where were we? Take two. I can't believe I hadn't put this on. Bula, namaste, g'day. In case you missed the fact that I'm a woman of color, ta-da! But this is me being subtle, unlike... More than a quarter of the world's wheat exports come from Russia and Ukraine. If you really want to know what's happening in the white stream, read financial news. I am obsessed with the financial news and newspapers, etc. Read through the jargon. Like tax laws, they're just there to scare you away. So don't get scared of these things. It's all just there to baffle you. From Bloomberg, headline, global food supply risks rise as key traders leave Russia. I'm reading, Russia's grip on global food supply is tightening after two of the biggest international traders said they would halt grain purchases for export from the country. The exit of Cargill Inc. and Viterra, American and Swiss respectively, means Russia, the world's largest wheat exporter, will have more control over its food shipments, and reap more of the revenues. Russia's dominance in the global grain market was laid bare by the war in Ukraine, with prices surging last year amid supply disruptions, skipping ahead, and a limit on foreigners' influence in Russia's food market. Russia has been making it increasingly difficult for foreign traders to obtain the paperwork necessary to export their grain. And why does this all matter for the global food supply? We're here in Australia and in this region. Well, has anyone had to sell a kidney lately for the cost of living? The departure of Cargill and Viterra leaves Russian grain supplies largely in the hands of domestic and government-funded companies, meaning Russia will control more of the much-needed revenue as war decimates its budget. This means it could be easier for Russia to use food exports as a tool of geopolitical influence. Among the main buyers of Russian grain are countries from the Middle East and Africa that have avoided strong criticism of the invasion of Ukraine. This is from TRT World. Lack of grain imports for these vulnerable countries can further exacerbate the already strained conditions, such as in Somalia, where an estimated 4.1 million people are currently in need of food assistance due to droughts, insecurity, conflict, and the pandemic. Egypt imports more than 70 to 80% of its grain from Russia. From Forbes now, why Egypt may have sought arms for food deal with Russia. I'm reading, Egypt's purported plan to covertly supply Russia with rockets could have been motivated by Cairo's need for a steady food supply, for the millions of Egyptian citizens relying on heavily subsidized bread. In their own mythologies, Ramses had wheat galore. This is carrying on. Egypt may have hoped to secure a similar deal to the one Russia recently offered North Korea. In March, U.S. National Security spokesperson John Kirby disclosed that Russia is offering North Korea food in exchange for munitions. From NPR, the impact of the Ukraine war on food supplies. It could have been much worse. The biggest bumper crop by far was in Russia. And while many nations have imposed sanctions on Russia in retaliation for its invasion of Ukraine, they have chosen to exempt Russia's export of food products. It means that Russia is profiting, in fact, from a war that they're largely responsible for. By contrast, Ukraine's crops have taken a big hit. You know, Putin's war on the world is making a lot of money for Putin and holding the world's stomachs hostage. This is also great business for gas corporations. Australia exports more gas than what gets used domestically. This is why it's so expensive for us here right now. We'll do a deep dive on that later. It has personally affected me, not just as a collective and how all our bills are going up. But we'll dive into that another time. And there are more links on the news page than I am actually sharing here in the news reading. So please make sure you check those out. So we're going to move on to other things. From the conversation, Anthony Albanese should attend the NATO summit if he can. Here's why. I'm reading. Over the past 2 days, there's been controversy over whether Prime Minister Anthony Albanese should accept an invitation to attend the NATO summit in Lithuania in July, with reports suggesting he will not. But the debate is a reminder that politicians and the public must recognize the value of such opportunities. I'll get to this in a moment. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or as I like to call it, WITO, is a 31-nation collective defense pact that includes most members of the European Union, as well as the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and Turkey. Under treaty, an invasion of any NATO member is treated as an invasion of all. This is of great comfort, especially for smaller countries with a threatening neighbor. In the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Finland has become a member, and Sweden has applied to join. Oh, how sweet. By the way, NATO was generally formed to counter Russia way back then. It's all a product of the Cold War. But get this, Russia is still considered a global North company, but second world. Deep dive coming up on this archaic method of splitting the world up into white and the rest, first world and the rest of us are second and third world, global north and global south. Deep dive coming up. And while Australia isn't a member of NATO, it has a good relationship with the organization. Australia is one of NATO's partners across the globe with permanent observer status. What a load of... Anyway, the person who authored this article is extremely accomplished and an expert in her field, but she's white, so we'll always be on the side of NATO, which is a bastion of the cold Euro war. We always need to protect under, Big Daddy, under Big Brother's white gaze. NATO is the largest military alliance on the planet. I wouldn't put it past them to wreak havoc just to keep themselves relevant. This is all about keeping China and India out of the power chambers. That's why China and India are building their own power within. But this is about keeping them out. Anyway, this is a link from Al Jazeera, desperately seeking relevance, NATO in the 21st century. The link is there on the Stylander. From Sydney Morning Herald, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been named one of Time's 100 most influential people in 2023. How do these things work? I mean, if he's not on next year's list, does this mean he sucks? I mean, I don't know. Is it like that People magazine's, sexiest pageant winner or whatever, or that Hollywood star thing that they all get on their knees for? The sidewalk, walk of fame thing. That's a paid thing. That's a paid thing. They pay for it. Whoever nominates can pay for it. It's like $55,000. It's special, sure, but it's still all propaganda. It's all about fame. And now we'll have a word from our sponsor, us. Why do you want to be famous? We ask this, unpack it, trash it, and then I say why I, now at the old age of 52, am finally pursuing it. Why I finally want fame, even though I have experienced small pockets of it throughout my life. Why do I want fame now? It's for the bigger picture. Links are there on the page on Radio Fly. From realestate.com, headline, ugly duckling suburbs emerging as swans, capital city neighborhoods in transformation. This is Sydney, this is Australian. One of the suburbs cited here used to be a Chinese area, a Chinatown in the northwest of Sydney. Best yum cha, vibrant little village. It was never an ugly duckling. And before that, before it became a Chinatown, it was actually a thing of legend. Eastwood Rugby Club is a legendary feeder for the wallabies. Apologies if you can hear a noise in the background. As I said, we're in Studio B for balcony because, well, it's lovely out here and the light's lovely. Anyway, the whites took the East Coast and stigmatized everything else. I'm reading, in the current perfect property storm of sky-high rents, surging interest rates, and a shortage of stock, countless investors and wannabe homeowners are now asking the literal million-dollar question, where's next? While there's no crystal ball or time machine when it comes to buying and investing, gosh, all the background noise, a brand new AI prototype may just provide the next best thing. I'm skipping ahead. The artificial intelligence tool has been created to better equip policymakers with knowledge and data about predicted neighborhood changes. Do you say data or data? The technology aims to identify an effect the researchers call spillover as an across-the-board indicator of get this, predicted gentrification. In this case, AI must stand for apartheid insistence, because that is what gentrification is. Even though it is blatant capitalist bigotry and considered controversial, gentrification continues to eat communities like that nothing in the never-ending story. Oh my goodness me, just obliterate culture, and to actually own land on land that was never ceded. We are all invaders, as friendly as some of us are. But I'm going to move on. This is from the Sydney Morning Herald. They have money and love fashion. So why do so many brands ignore these women? In Australia, the average woman wears a standard 14 to 16, although there is variation between brands. But many labels still only make up to a size 12. Curvy, or plus size, is typically defined as size 18 and up, but with 60% of women classed as overweight or obese, it is a lot closer to the median than even 30 years ago. That is crucial. And yet the fashion industry largely, is that supposed to be a pun, still treats it as a niche market. There's a lot to unpack in this. 30 years ago, we were not large, and the average size was not that. I don't know where to go with this. The market is determined by spending power and the loudest, and whoever the loudest is in demanding to be seen. Fiji's fashion industry, I gotta tell you, before I go further than that, I am actually wearing a Fiji designer's top design, and they do design for the larger sized woman because it's not considered larger sized, it is just considered the norm. This is very different to how Fiji was in the 90s, where when I was a top model at times, and we were not this. So, excuse me, I do need to clear my throat. I might have to take a sip of my husband's beautiful Arabic-inspired coffee in this wonderful teacup made in Australia back when everything good was. But now, Australia has just chosen profit over people. Where was I going? Fiji's fashion industry certainly butters its long loaf this way. It's an insider joke and it's fallen flat right now. But while we were in Fiji, from RMZ, Fiji nightclub hours under scrutiny due to increase in brawls, robberies, attacks. No, These are band-aid solutions to appease the Puritans. Sydney-siders saw how our lockout laws destroyed what was once a 24-hour vibrant city. You know, I agree that people are the main problem in this world, but we need to stop being policed. We need to stop being nannied, and we need to be trusted. The people who do have a problem with that, well, look, Fiji has a big problem with alcohol because A, it's a small place, there's nothing to do unless you're rich and then you fly out. And B, everyone is stressed. At least the elites and expats have money. So people drink, and all of this causes huge problems, and the world over. People are stressed and they don't drink to have flavorsome experiences. They drink for oblivion. So this is why we're having problems. So I'm reading from here, this article. Announcing the review of nightclub opening hours at a post-cabinet press conference on Tuesday last week, Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka said under the current laws, nightclubs were authorized to operate from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. for designated zones. In recent years, there have been numerous reports of brawls, robberies, and attacks in areas around nightclubs in designated zones in the early hours, Mr. Rabuka said. This has also resulted in loss of lives, he said. He said the Fiji police had made submissions to the review, given ongoing assaults, violence, and robberies are cause for concern and pose a risk to the safety of citizens, says the OG coup leader. Disclosure. As an Indo-Fijian who was directly affected by the first coups done by our now Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka, I am giving Mr. Rabuka the benefit of the doubt. And I'm objectively observing the proceedings from my lofty and well-earned position as an outlier. Anyway, when I first heard or read the word outlier, I thought it was outlier. I was 13 or 14. I loved it for myself. I was an outlier. I was very disappointed when I found it's just an outlier, but that's what I still am, pronunciation or not. Anyway, so far what's happening in Fiji is a mixed bag. No, they're going after the easy targets. The new government needs to focus on bigger things like, I don't know, roads in place of potholes, and maybe turfing the expats. Because if Fijians want Fiji back for themselves, start with the ones who stole it in the first place. Still from RNZ, Fiji's top prosecutor suspended for alleged misconduct. Fiji's chief prosecutor has been suspended for allegations of misbehavior by the country's head of state. Pride, who is an expat, has held the position of chief prosecutor since November 2011, has been told to hand over all official property, including laptop and mobile phone, to the chief registrar of the High Court. This story is wild. Politics in Fiji is better than any drama series you have ever watched. Comedy, too. Darling, we should write the script. I will play the kind but sardonic newsreader. It's going to be a stretch, though. Back to the story. Earlier on Thursday, Pride's office released an update on the progress of police complaints involving high-profile individuals who included Mr. Rambuka, former Prime Minister Bainimarama, and former AG Syed Qayyum. Others on the list were the suspended police commissioner, former CID director, former elections supervisor, rural and maritime development minister, and the Methodist Church of Fiji president. These people are all under investigation. Even the ones in current seat. Anyway, while Pride awaits his pending investigation, Attorney General, the current one, Siromi Turanga, who has recently been the subject of some controversy himself, links provided, has alleged he met with the country's former chief law officer, by he means Pride, and spent about 30 to 45 minutes conversing alone with him at a public event hosted by the Japanese embassy in Suva. So there. He says this is an alleged act of misconduct or misbehavior, which, look, okay, he's not wrong, because if Pride, as the DPP, has files against these people on his desk, like, hello, we saw Law and Order, you don't fraternize with those you're prosecuting. Dun dun. From the Fiji Times. 1-800 marijuana plants found. Call this number now. Jokes, oh my gosh. But seriously, new government, get onto the medical cannabis train. Tourism and sugar are so over. From the Economic Times, India, sugar rally pauses after hitting decade high on shortage fears. Yep. Sugar is getting harder and harder to find. That's why it's getting more and more expensive. It's not a sweet deal. The market has been driven higher by a lack of deliverable sugar ahead of the expiry of the May white sugar contract on Friday, which is, yesterday. Crazy, huh? The less sugar, the more expensive. Check any biscuit aisle. The white sugar futures contract is used as the global benchmark for the pricing of physical white sugar. Now, the deep dive this week is on sugar. So, be here for it. It's going to be sweet. I have to come up with some new lines here. But anyway, this is, sugar is why I have to jump to this because, well, look, I have an affinity with this story because you'll see why. Giovanni Ferrero is Italy's richest man with a net worth of $36 billion. Nutella accounts for 1/5 of total sales. That's around $3 billion. And I contribute a lot. So this is why this week's deep dive is a sweet dive into sugar. We're just going to go offshore really quickly. Does the sun really belong in its family? Astronomers get to the bottom of stellar identity crisis, and this is from space.com. The sun is having an identity crisis because it shows different magnetic activity and rotation rates than other stars in its current classification. Scientists have debated whether the sun is really like the other stars in its family. Hello? They're calling the sun a Nepo baby. If the sun is having an identity crisis, we're doomed. Dear solar system, I'm out of here. You're the lunar system now. I'm out of here too. Thanks for joining me. See you next week.